Speaking of love, I'm just loving being with you in the sanctuary today. Usually I'm one of those households that Lori takes such tender care of on Zoom, and it's sure good to be here in the flesh. I'll share three very, very brief readings from a very, very brief text called the Gospel of Mary. As a kid, I would have been shocked to hear the end of that sentence a lot. But we'll get to that. These are translated by Mark M. Matheson and Karen L. King. Translators have to have middle initials, is one thing I've learned in preparing today's talk. Number one, the Savior said, "Sin doesn't exist, but you're the ones who make sin." Number two, the Savior said, "I told you to be content at heart. If you're discontented, find contentment in the presence of the various images of nature." Anyone who has ears to hear should hear. And the third, when the Blessed One said these things, he greeted them all and said, "Peace be with you. Acquire my peace. Be careful not to let anyone mislead you by saying, 'Look over here,' or 'Look over there,' because the child of humanity exists within you. Follow them. Those who seek the child of humanity will find them." The problem with Mary Magdalene wasn't just that she was a woman and the subject of an official smear campaign, which I'll get to in a minute. Her theology, or the theology taught in her name, became such a scandal, the Gospel of Mary was suppressed and condemned as heresy. During our own banned book celebration a few weeks ago, the Gospel of Mary could have been in every corner. We were never meant to learn it, or more, to believe it. We were never meant to understand ourselves or humanity at large the way the Gospel of Mary presents it. In the Gospel of Mary, there's no such thing as sin. The Savior comes out and says so. The presence of divinity exists within each and every one of us, not out there, but in here. The Blessed One also comes out and says that. What's more, the spiritual nature of human beings is so completely non-gendered, a woman can lead and preach and guide without trouble. Jesus also comes out and makes that clear. Or maybe I should say, she can preach and lead and guide by making good trouble. If you agree with Karen L. King and other feminist scholars like I do, you'll look back and see a pattern of behavior by those in power to keep the rest of the people from having much power at all. Looking at the national news today, I wonder, does that feel familiar? You've probably heard the rumors. Mary Magdalene was a repentant sinner, a fallen woman, a sex worker. If that's who she was, that's who she was. So be it. Who are we, as the feminist saying goes today, to slut shame her? If she was disgraced in her time, then she was disgraced in her time. Except she wasn't. Even in the New Testament, she is beloved. She's understood to be smart, to be loyal, to be brave. As a favored disciple, she's the first to announce the resurrection, the biggest news in the entire tradition. From the Gospel of Matthew to Revelation, there's not a single rumor about her anywhere. You wouldn't even need to read the Gospel of Mary to kind of love her. Except I do believe we need the Gospel of Mary. By we, I mean anyone who's Christian, anyone who's ever been Christian, and anyone who's ever been affected by Christianity, which includes everyone I have ever known. I don't mean we all need to believe in it. I just mean that Christianity itself could be worlds different if those who call ourselves Christian had had a chance to believe in it, a chance to follow its wisdom. But let me back up. First of all, I should say that not everyone agrees that the Gospel of Mary refers to Mary Magdalene. As you may have noticed, there's a preponderance of Marys in the book called the Bible. So maybe she was Jesus' mother or one of his sisters. One of his sisters, that might be a conversation for another day. Still, the Mary in the Gospel of Mary has so much in common with Mary Magdalene, it's a reasonable presumption. She's a disciple. Peter tries to silence her. She's right there in the action, and so on. Second of all, I should tell you a few more rough details about where this gospel comes from, when it was found, and so on. All right, so bear with me here. It was probably written down. Okay, so there's going to be a lot of probably, maybe, could have been, might be, we think, we have no idea. So that'll be all over this paragraph. Please try to listen for the words in between. So it was probably written down in about the year 200 or maybe centuries later. But it was written down at least probably 160 years after Jesus lived and died. There are roughly 3 versions of the Gospel of Mary existing today, which points to how prominent it likely was at the time. One of these versions is written in the Coptic language, which is rooted in Egypt, which is in Africa, and 2 are written in Greek. It was most likely a Gentile text, rather than a text that originated in Jewish communities. Though banned and suppressed for well over a century, the Coptic version, which is called the Berlin Codex, which doesn't seem quite right, does it? The Coptic version is called the Berlin Codex, but there's reason for that. It was purchased by someone from Germany is the reason. But the Coptic version, which is called the Berlin Codex, was found in 1896, more than 100 years ago. So well within all of our lifetimes. So we might have known of it a little bit earlier in our lives. Also, and this one breaks my heart, significant passages are missing today. If you do the math, more of it is missing than is present. It's a 17-page papyrus text, and 10 whole pages have been lost. The very beginning, and then half of the middle of, a portion of the middle of the text. Third, here's where we're going to get gritty. I should say a little bit more about what happened to this gospel years ago. In the late 500s, Pope Gregory the Great essentially led that smear campaign I referred to just a little bit ago against Mary Magdalene and her gospel. Here's what he had to say about her in a sermon, no less. So just imagine it's somewhere in the year 500, and the Pope is telling you this, the very Pope. She whom Luke calls the sinful woman, whom John calls Mary, we believe to be the Mary from whom 7 devils were ejected, according to Mark. And what did these 7 devils signify, if not all the vices? It is clear brothers, that the woman previously used the unguent to perfume her flesh in forbidden acts. What she therefore displayed more scandalously, she was now offering to God in a more praiseworthy manner. She had coveted with earthly eyes, but now, through penitence, these are consumed with tears. She displayed her hair to set off her face, but now her hair dries her tears. She had spoken proud things with her mouth, but in kissing the Lord's feet, she now planted her mouth on the Redeemer's feet. For every delight, therefore, she had in herself, she now immolated herself. She turned the mass of her crimes to virtues in order to serve God entirely in penance, for as much as she had wrongly held God in contempt. The issue I have with Pope Gregory and many church leaders from about 200 to, well, the present, is that too often they create a hell on earth in people's hearts, people's minds, and people's bodies. I'm sorry. I have something I need to say before that. What Gregory was trying to do and successfully accomplished was not only create a false narrative of Mary of Magdalene, not only reduce her to a presumed sexuality rather than her authentic spirituality, but deny the fundamental teachings of the Gospel of Mary in the first place. Before I go any further, I want to be clear that I have never met Pope Gregory the Great, and I have no personal vendetta against him. He was probably trying to help people be good people and what he understood to be good Christians. He was probably trying to help people who he thought otherwise might genuinely go to hell. He probably genuinely believed in that hell, that heresy sent you to this fiery inferno directly upon taking your last breath, and that he had a genuine responsibility to keep people out of that excruciating damnation. Here we go. But the issue I have with Pope Gregory and some folks yet today is this creation of hell on earth. There's a cliche in our time, maybe you've heard it, something like what you run from, you end up chasing. I believe that in running from hell, they have found it for others, if not for themselves. At this point, I'd like to go a little deeper with the readings I shared a little bit ago. Number 1, the Savior said, "Sin doesn't exist, but you're the ones who make sin when you act in accordance with improper mixing of material and spiritual nature, which is called sin. That's why the good came among you, up to the things of every nature in order to restore it within its root." In other words, sin is an illusion, but we live by this illusion when we act with a false understanding of our nature, when we get mixed up about our inherently spiritual nature. But since our nature is actually oriented toward God, we can't actually sin because we can't actually be separate from our nature. Number 2, the Savior said, "I told you to be content at heart. If you're discontented, find contentment in the presence of the various images of nature. Anyone who has ears to hear should hear." In the Gospel of Mary, contentment is accessible through a steady practice of presence. While our human nature is inherently spiritual, we are not called to disparage natural creation or its images. Through these practices, we are reminded of the God, the good, as Mary says, who animates all of life, including ourselves. Which brings us to the last one. When the Blessed One said these things, he greeted them all and said, "Peace be with you. Acquire my peace. Be careful not to let anyone mislead you by saying, 'Look over here,' or 'Look over there,' because the child of humanity exists within you. Follow them. Those who seek the child of humanity will find them." This may be the most radical teaching of all. Peace does not come through obedience to authorities, adherence to authoritative rules, or group identification with would-be dictators. Peace exists within. We need only to seek it. The child of humanity is in here, in the in here in each of us. Don't look over there to Christian nationalism, or look over here to deportation of immigrants, or denial of health care to trans people, or endorsement of misogyny, and on and on and on. Follow the soul within you. Follow the soul within us. In the Gospel of Mary, shocking as this may be, the best thing human beings can be is human beings. When the other disciples questioned their own capacity to go out and preach the word, here's what happens in the Gospel of Mary. Mary arose and greeted them all. She said to her brothers and sisters and siblings, "Don't weep and grieve or let your hearts be divided, because his grace will be with you all and will protect you. Rather, we should praise his greatness because he's prepared us and made us humans." What do we know about humans? Humans feel, humans grieve, humans struggle, humans rage, humans sing, humans laugh, humans dance, humans love. The Gospel of Mary can show us who we are called to be. This gospel is not an antidote to the New Testament Gospels. After all, that Jesus, that famous Jesus of love and compassion, is there in those New Testament Gospels. But the Gospel of Mary is a meaningful fleshing out, an invitation not to be Christian, not to be anti-Christian, but to be human, which means to be sacred, which means to share this sacredness among us, and together to be whole. That's the irony. For those of us who would believe this presence of divinity lives within each of us. If it's in me, and you, and you, and you, it's also in the ones who say it's not in me or you. The very ones who defy both our sacredness and our humanity. In the Gospel of Mary, there is no other. There is no enemy, only us. Whether that's easy or not. Maybe the banning of this gospel starts to make more sense, to me anyway. It breaks our hearts wide open, and in those broken places, we may find ourselves to be, as Mary Magdalene said, truly human. The most wonderful and frightening thing I could ever imagine to be. Thank you.